Good morning and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. Today will be a crucial day as high-stakes talks between the Kremlin and Washington are set to take place. Now, Monday night, Donald Trump claimed that without his intervention, Ukrainian soldiers would have already perished. Now, speaking at the JFK Center in Washington, D.C., Trump went on to say that the fate of Ukrainian troops will be a key topic in his call with Vladimir Putin later today.
Tremendous things to report. Tomorrow I'm speaking with President Putin of Russia to save some soldiers who are in deep trouble. They're captured. Essentially, they're surrounded by Russian soldiers. So I give you a lot of different things in one news conference, but it's a big deal. They're surrounded by Russian soldiers, and I believe if it wasn't for me, they wouldn't be here any longer. I was able to get them not to do anything at this moment, but it's a bad situation in Russia, and it's a bad situation in Ukraine.
Now, ahead of the highly anticipated Kremlin-Washington talks set for Tuesday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy addressed his nation on Monday, stating that, quote, "It is Putin that has been unable to muster a simple yes in response to a ceasefire proposal." Now, he also announced that he and French President Emmanuel Macron have discussed a joint Ukraine-France position.
Дуже важливо.
It is very important that tomorrow marks a week since the US proposal for a ceasefire in the sky, at sea and on the front lines was put on the table. This proposal could have been implemented long ago. Every day in wartime means human lives. By now, it has been nearly a week since it became absolutely clear to everyone in the world, even to those who, for the past 3 years, refused to acknowledge the truth, that it is Putin who continues and prolongs this war. For a week now, Putin has been unable to muster a simple yes in response to the ceasefire proposal. I also spoke today with French President Macron. We coordinated our position both ahead of the conversation between President Trump and Putin and before upcoming meetings in Europe. I want to thank Emmanuel and the entire French nation for their support.
Я хочу подякувати Еммануелю та подякувати всій Франції за підтримку.
Now, for expert commentary on the topic, TVP World spoke to Diane Francis, a senior fellow at Atlantic Council, who told us that, quote, Trump has a lot more cards than Putin, but he doesn't seem inclined to use them. Now, she also suggested that Trump's rapprochement with Russia in order to gain an upper hand over America's main adversaries, Iran and China, might prove to be naive. Let's listen.
Trump knows the kind of position of Europe and Ukraine. Security guarantees are essential. This business of power plants is a new one. You've got a power plant in Kursk that's no longer surrounded by Ukrainians, but you've got one in Zaporizhia and Chernobyl that are surrounded by Russians. I don't know what he's playing at here. Is this a form of hostage taking that he's trying to scare the Americans into giving up too much, or what? So, we're sort of in chaos here, and I really don't think there's any credible noises coming out of the Russians or the Americans at this point. The Russians and Americans who have been sitting down talking about this truce and have been stringing along Trump with promises that they will help him deal with Iran and its nuclear ambitions and help him isolate or control China. If he's believing that, then he's really, very naive. Obviously, Russia's two greatest allies are Iran, who supply weapons, and China, who supplies technology and buys all of its oil. So, he's hardly going to double cross them. And that seems to be the whispering going on into Trump's ear to get him to not be as vigorous. Trump has all the cards because he can flood Ukraine with weapons to make Russia's life more miserable. And he can also double or triple the sanctions against Russians, companies, oligarchs to make their life more miserable, put oil caps on, intervene with oil transfers by ship, and so on. He's got a lot more cards than Putin has at this point. He doesn't seem inclined to use them or even threaten them.
The weapons must fall silent. The atrocities and sabotage must cease. The deported Ukrainian children must be reunited with their families, French President Emmanuel Macron has declared, referring to a series of conditions that Russia needs to meet when working for a peace solution in Ukraine.
Following Saturday's meeting on peace and security in Ukraine and my discussion with the President of the United States yesterday, I spoke with President Zelenskyy today. President Zelenskyy demonstrated the courage to accept the US proposal for a 30-day ceasefire. It is now up to Russia to prove that it truly wants peace. Enough deaths, enough lives destroyed, enough devastation. The weapons must fall silent. The atrocities and sabotage must cease. The deported Ukrainian children must be reunited with their families. These are all conditions that Russia must fulfill. And I am confident in President Trump's commitment to this cause. We must now move forward with all our partners to present a concrete peace plan. A peace plan that provides strong security guarantees for Ukraine. A peace plan that ensures lasting peace in Ukraine and Europe. A peace plan that prevents Russia from attacking again.
On now to more news from Washington. Without the United States, people in France would now be speaking German. This is what White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said, referring to comments made by a French lawmaker who declared that if Washington continues to perceive international relations in a transactional way, then the Statue of Liberty should be returned back to Paris.
So is President Trump going to send the Statue of Liberty back to France?
Absolutely not. And my advice to that unnamed low-level French politician would be to remind them that it's only because of the United States of America that the French are not speaking German right now. So they should be very grateful to our great country.
Tuesday, the German parliament will vote on a bill that will make it possible to take on unprecedented levels of debt to invest in defense. Germany aims to spend hundreds of billions of euros on national defense and infrastructure renovation. The new plan, however, requires changes to the German constitution. Now, the constitution stipulates that the state can spend as much money as it takes in. While the 16 federal states are bound to strictly comply with the rule, the federal government can borrow funds within 0.35% of the country's GDP. The draft resolution brought before the Bundestag says that funds for the Bundeswehr may be financed via loans in the future. This also includes military aid to Ukraine, which is set at 4 billion euros for 2025, with an additional 3 billion likely approved soon. Now, the bill was drafted by the center-right bloc of the CDU-CSU and the center-left Social Democratic Party. The two are currently negotiating the formation of a new federal government under CDU party leader Friedrich Merz.
Ich bitte Sie Ruhe.
Monday, Belarusian authorities sentenced a Japanese national to 7 years in prison on espionage charges. Now, Masatoshi Nakanishi was convicted for allegedly taking over 9,000 photos of civilian and military infrastructure. Authorities accuse Nakanishi of taking photos of railway infrastructure and traveling to the Ukrainian border. The Japanese national has been in custody since July for allegedly spying for a foreign intelligence service between 2018 and 2024. Now, his closed-door trial took the Belarusian authorities some 2 months. Despite appeals and diplomatic letters, the Japanese embassy in Belarus was barred from attending the court proceedings. Since taking power in 1994, Lukashenko has imprisoned hundreds of his political opponents and human rights activists under the guise of anti-state activity. Now, there are currently over 1,200 political prisoners in the country. According to Lithuanian prosecutors, the individual behind the arson attack on a furniture store in Vilnius in May last year is the same person who's responsible for setting fire to the biggest Polish shopping center in Warsaw the very same month. Investigators suspect the whole operation was orchestrated by the Kremlin. Yevgeny Rusakov reports from Vilnius.
A press conference was held in Vilnius on Monday, during which the chief prosecutor of the Organized Crime and Corruption Investigation Department of the Prosecutor General's Office, Arturas Urbelis, revealed details of an arson attack on one of the shopping centers in Vilnius. The evidence contained in the pre-trial investigation material gives reasonable grounds to believe that the offenses were committed by a Ukrainian national who acted in the interests of the Russian military structures and security services in a pre-established organized terrorist group with the aim of committing terrorist crimes in Lithuania and Latvia, together with other persons who are under separate pre-trial investigation.
The discovery and suspicion that these criminal acts and their organizers are linked to the Russian special services, military structures or other security units.
According to a Lithuanian official, the suspect is accused of 3 offenses: committing a terrorist act, training for terrorist purposes, and illegal possession of explosives. He also specified that during the pre-trial investigation, it was established that the immediate perpetrators were 2 persons under the age of 20. One of the accused is currently detained in Poland, and law enforcement authorities in both countries are cooperating and coordinating their actions.
Both perpetrators are citizens of Ukraine. One of them is currently detained in Poland, and the process of transferring part of the case, namely to Polish colleagues, is also underway.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk also commented on the case on his X account, saying that the investigation of the Lithuanian prosecutor's office has confirmed suspicions that Russian secret services are responsible for setting fires to shopping centers in Vilnius and Warsaw. Straight from Vilnius, Evgeny Rusakov for TVP World.
Moving on now to the Middle East. Israeli Defense Forces launched a wave of airstrikes on the Gaza Strip early on Tuesday, as instructed by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Gaza's health ministry, run by Hamas, has reported that the attacks killed over 300 people, many of them children. Now, the Israeli Prime Minister says he instructed the military to take, quote, strong action against Hamas in Gaza, as there was no progress in talks to extend the ceasefire. Now, Israeli officials say the operation is expected to expand. Negotiations on the second phase of the ceasefire were scheduled to begin in early February of 2025. Now, during the first phase, Israeli hostages were released and Palestinians were handed back to Gaza and released from Israeli jails. Now, Egypt, Qatar, and the United States were mediating talks on the next phases. However, the White House said it had been consulted on and supports Israel's latest strikes.
A series of attacks against Hamas targets in Gaza. We will show no mercy on our enemies. Let me be very clear. Israel will not stop until all of our hostages are back home. We will make it very clear to the Security Council that if they want to stop the war in Gaza, they have to ensure that the hostages are coming back to Israel. We are committed to bring them back.
And that completes this edition of World News here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.